All right, we are live. Welcome to episode 3 of our Sellers Bootcamp. Today we're going to talk about seller expenses. And let me have my co host join. All right, Javier, three, two, one. Yes. Uh,
Yes.
Hi, how are you,
How are
dear?
you?
How are you doing?
Pretty good. I cannot complain. It's been a busy day.
Hi. Let me make sure that I have this as public and the privacy, which it wasn't. Um, and I'm gonna put seller expenses. Javier, do you want to do a quick recap of episode 1? How is the market in Chicagoland area?
Absolutely. So we were kind of discussing how there was a lot of rollover, as I would like to call it, a lot of rollover buyers from 2020 that kind of rolled over into 2021. Rates were very stable. We have seen a fluctuation. So we actually have seen a fluctuation in rates in the last week and a half, but they're actually pretty stable, still, at 3% or below in certain cases, depending on the buyer. And essentially, it's just been a seller's market. So we're looking for more sellers to be able to put inventory out there, so that this way we can hopefully get some of these buyers under contract.
I hear you.
Because it definitely has been difficult. I think like on most of our offers with our clients, we're usually dealing with 4 or 5 minimum offers on the table.
Well,
So
the average is actually 11 offers on the table per property. That's
mm,
the average that we have right now. So, but
yeah,
compared to nationwide, we're actually not too bad. So,
yeah, no,
uh,
because I got some transactions right now inside of the state, and it is crazy in certain areas. I know in Texas, I think we're competing with like 15 or 16 offers on a property that was over 500,000. So like that was just kind of shocking to me. Got a little bit of a sticker shock there.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been very stable. The market keeps going up. I keep seeing like I definitely have told everyone, like all of my homeowners that have purchased in the last couple of years, that they'll be surprised if they actually did like a re-inventory of exactly how much equity they have by maybe getting an updated CMA just based on recent comparable sales. But I think appreciation is going up at a higher rate because of that, because most buyers are kind of creating these bidding wars
Yeah.
that is only, increasing the market a little bit swiftly.
It sure is. Another thing, well, we will do a recap at the very end. But another thing that we spoke about on episode 2, that was episode 1, how is the market in Chicago? Episode 2, we talk about how to sell at top dollar, and we emphasized on what to do to prepare your property for media day, since the first showing is always online. And also, we talk about pre-sale inspections. We will probably tap on a little bit today. But today episode, we're going to talk about the cost of selling, just in average, then some questions at the very end, but also tap on the sellers, what is a seller net sheet. And for that, we have a special guest, our dear Avni Shah. It's one of the attorneys we work with, and she is joining us just now. So let me add her on live.
Love Avni.
You're going to love your Avni in live. One ad.
Hi.
Ew, she's a little nerd like me. I love
Yeah.
it.
Thank you, Avni, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, thank you. So, because we got great feedback last week on having things a little bit more structured, so let's go. Let me just make sure that we're on agenda and go over to the first point that we want to talk about, and it's probably was the average cost for selling in Chicago.
Sure. So I generally just, if without doing any preliminary figures, if a client is interested in just getting a percentage, what I usually put out there is whatever the commission percentage is, which is obviously negotiated between the seller and the agent, that percent. And then on top of that, you're going to have anywhere from 3 to 3.5% in closing costs, which include, and we'll go through what those are: title fees, I even include tax credits, transfer taxes, depending on the time of year you close. And then that's the general percentage that I give there, plus whatever the payoff of their mortgages. So if they have existing liens on the property, usually it's only one mortgage, sometimes it could be two, or if there's any tax liens or anything more complicated, you
Mhm.
add that in separately. So generally speaking, 3 to 3.5% in closing costs.
Okay.
Mhm.
Awesome. And you mentioned seller proceeds or seller net sheet. I wanted to touch base on that. First of all, what is a seller net sheet?
Sure.
And then we can go over what the components are. What is actually the breaking down of it?
So the seller probably wants more details than just, 3.5%. So the net sheet actually is going to give you a specific amount or at least a good estimate of what the seller is going to net after the
Mhm.
sale happens. So basically, what are they taking home from the sale? And what you include in that is obviously the purchase price. And then you do the breakdown of each individual cost. So you would have the big ticket items commission, you have our attorney fees, title fees, transfer taxes, both at the state, county, and city level, depending on where you close. You also include in there tax credits. Taxes are 1 year in arrears in Cook County and in DuPage, actually, all the surrounding Collar counties, taxes are 1 year in arrears. So you have to calculate giving tax credits to the buyer at closing based on when you close. And so that could be a year and a half, sometimes worth of tax credits, title insurance, and those related fees. If you have a single family, we have to order water, zoning certificates. If you have a condo, we have to order the condo documents and prorate assessments. If you're doing a rental property, we have to prorate rents and consider security deposit transfers and things like that. Survey, if it's a single family, which is, a few $100 there. And then any closing cost credits that are negotiated during the contract as well should be included in that. You total all up those costs up. That'll give you the total, disbursements of the seller. And then you subtract that from the purchase price and then you get your net. So that's what the seller can expect to receive, once we close.
Okay, so once we see, online, we see, oh, this property is selling at 250 or it's 300,000, and then you tell your seller, "Yep, I'm selling your property for 300,000." Well, that it's a lot less what you're gonna get once you apply those numbers.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good to know upfront, and we are very in our team. We're very proactive to with this. We give them already a little bit of an idea, very accurate idea of what the seller is going to net and what the proceeds are going to be after applying all these fees. And I know you touch base on those buyer credits that I know Javier loves when we get some of those buyer credits
Mm-hmm.
because it helps our buyers coming to the closing table, but technically it doubled the cost of closing costs for the seller.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I mean, in this type of market, a lot of our buyers are not getting seller credits because that's the only, I mean, one of the ways that we can win offers in a multiple offer situation.
Mm-hmm.
But sellers are, I guess, are happier now if they don't have to offer also that help to the buyer to come to the closing table, which means more proceeds for them.
Right.
Well, thank you for breaking down what it is seller net sheet and the parts that they actually are the components of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, I wanted to ask about, and I know we did have somebody sending a question already. Oh, and one of our past clients, Lupita, she said, "Oh, Avni's awesome."
Thank
You did
you.
represent them.
Hi.
Um, that's awesome. We talk about standing mortgages, title expenses, what the survey is. Do you mind just clarifying what the survey is for some of our not so heavy sellers?
Sure. So when it's a single family residence, we actually ask the seller when we, get the contract whether they have an old survey or not and whether they've done any improvements on the property. So a survey we need to order if there isn't an old one that we could use. Usually the cost is around $450 to $500. It's only for single family residents or multi-units, or, if you do commercial space, not for condos, because condos have a PLATA survey attached to the declaration. So we don't need to order one for that. It's a title requirement. So one of the things, and we can get into that later, is we do have to order title commitment. And one of the seller's costs would be providing an owner's policy for the buyer at closing. And we can talk about what that range of costs are. But
Yeah.
one of the aspects of closing, using a title company and providing that title insurance, and, all lenders require title insurance. So we usually close through a title company who provides the insurance and acts as the escrowee to facilitate the closing. So one of their requirements is to have a survey for single family residents, because we need to make sure that we provide clear title at closing. And there's a survey exception on title that we would need to clear. So we would have to look at basically the lot size of that specific property and make sure there's not any encroachments. And encroachments are really, whether the building is, where we believe that it should be inside the lot. And if there's any, if it's going into someone else's property or some other building is coming into our property, we got to insure over that and insure that for the buyer. So that's one of the reasons why we'd get a survey for that. And I actually just missed a huge closing cost, which was the payoff of the mortgage. So a lot of sellers need to realize that whatever their existing mortgage is on the property, that gets paid off at closing. And that's the biggest expense. So after that,
I actually, I'm glad you pointed out. There was one client that she asked this week, and she's like, "This might be a very stupid question, but so if I buy a house now, do I have to pay it off before I sell it? Like if something happens and I need to sell in 2 years, in 3 years from now, it's very, it's a basic question for us that we do this for a living, but for somebody that is a first time home buyer, they
Yes.
might not know, never had a history, never had realtors or attorneys, real estate
Right.
attorneys or lenders in their family. They might not know they do not need to pay the property off in order to sell, but they kind of do by paying the mortgage paid off
Yes.
with the proceeds when it's time to sell. But they don't have to wait until the years pass in order to sell. I mean, how that's going to work.
Oh yeah. I mean, look, don't we all wish we had hundreds of thousands of dollars laying around where we could actually pay it off before we sell? That usually isn't the case. But what ends up happening at the closing table is it's the buyer's mortgage, that
Mhm.
new financing that is actually, being utilized to pay off the seller's mortgage. If you really think about it that way, that's how the
Yeah.
concept works, right? That's how you're able to pay it off. And that's one of the requirements for closing, is to make sure that the seller's liens and mortgages, including mortgages, are removed. So that's how it actually works. The dynamic of the closing is money is just kind of moving from the buyer's lender and the buyer to the seller, but before the seller gets the net, they got to pay out all of these other fees, including the payoff of their mortgage.
I see. Makes sense. Makes sense. Javier, you're too quiet. Do you have any questions before we continue to the next
I
point?
want to know when I get the open floor so I can ask like the good questions that I think people would really like to know. I'm the lender, so I get surprised on things all the time. Whenever someone doesn't do their job accordingly before they list a property, I'm the one who usually has to answer some of those questions. So my questions pertain to you, Avni, would be what are some of the things that you can do to like, I get surprises sometimes these hidden liens, right?
Yes.
So like they took out a down payment assistance grant at some point in time when they did their purchase. Or sometimes they've been in the home for a long time and they did have a loan modification at some point in time where the loan was modified, and maybe their payoff may be representing something on the credit report, but they maybe had like a $25,000 or $30,000 balloon clause or something like that for the modification. Like what would you do to go like a little bit of a step further with your due diligence if you got a potential seller that's maybe like, what are some questions that maybe the agent should be asking up front to make sure that at least we don't have any hidden surprises? Like once we already have a contract, we're excited, and then all of a sudden maybe we get a title commitment that has something on there which could potentially be a lending issue.
Sure. So, I mean, look, communication is key. Usually the listing agent, is that first contact with the seller. So they're going to ask the questions that, we would want to know in the real estate industry, and before we list this, before we get it under contract, so we're not wasting time, we want to know what are the existing mortgages and liens on the property. Now, most of the time, the sellers are going to know, oh, I have this one mortgage that I'm making payments on. But you'll be surprised that a lot of sellers, especially the ones that are doing loan modifications, don't even know, kind of the structure of loan modifications, that another mortgage could be recorded or a loan modification agreement is recorded with extra fees on there. They may not be aware that, there's tax liens on the property. They haven't paid their taxes, and the, IRS could attach a lien to the property. So all of those things, while we ask the preliminary questions, sometimes the seller just doesn't know about it, or, doesn't disclose it to us for whatever reason. So we do a track search. So a lot of times I'll get contacted by listing agents in advance because they may be concerned about the net proceeds and making sure that, the seller's not bringing money to the closing or whatever else. We will order a track search through a title company, and that'll give us a kind of a preliminary review of what is recorded on that property. So we'll see what mortgages are on there, the open mortgages. We'll see any open liens. We'll see past due taxes on there if they haven't paid it for, the past however many years. So we can use all of that information to then do an appropriate net sheet. So I assist with preparing net sheets. I assist with track search. So anytime, an agent has a client where they're concerned about this, we can provide all of that information to them so that they can make, basically disclose to the seller, okay, this is all the information that we have. And do you want to move forward at this purchase price, or determine a different purchase price if, the numbers don't work out?
That was actually my main point with that, because if we have all these issues, or if
Mm-hmm.
there's anything is standing, or any talking about buildings, or any violations, or anything
Yeah.
that has not been corrected, that might be reflected on the asking price in order
Mm-hmm.
to sell. As we always say, all properties have a buyer, but we just have to price accordingly. And in this type of market, it's a little bit crazy. It's very, very active, and very hot and very competitive. So a lot of buyers are taking responsibilities more than they used to,
Mm-hmm.
even if the property has violations. But at least to be proactive and informed, them, and they can make a better decision, so you don't have broken contract because they just didn't know. And
Mm-hmm.
after they spend some money in the inspection, or they have been under contract for a while, they have missed opportunities already. Any reactivated property, a lot of times, doesn't sell for the same price that it could have been if it was initially done properly. So it totally. So one thing that we also like asking before listing a multi-unit is zoning certificate. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because we want to avoid, if there is a legal three flat but it's not a legal three flat when the seller first purchased it, maybe was a three flat, or maybe they don't even remember if they bought it. I have a seller, I have a contract right now where the seller had the property for 67 years.
Oh, wow.
Very old person. They don't know what's happening right now. Their kids are the one, they're old already, and they are, trying to help with this process. But now we are facing a zoning certificate where it says it's a one unit. It's not a single family. It's
Mm-hmm.
a traditional brick square rectangle with two entrances separate in the front, two separate entrances on the back. It's completely a classic two flat.
Right.
But the zoning certificate says one. So now we have to, and it couldn't be edited or corrected. It had to
Mm-hmm.
be reordered, and that adds a lot more time. Now, all of these things could be avoided if proactively looking. And again, we cannot always avoid certain things because, as you said, sometimes they just don't know, or the little they know might not be sufficient. And until you do the truck search and you have zoning certificate and you have title work and you have all these documents in front of you, you're going to be able to see these issues. But as far as we can get to
Mm-hmm.
know more, that's the best for our clients for sure to be successful
Right.
in their sale. So actually, with that question, or those questions with the liens, or about IRS that we just touched base, our zoning certificate, we have touched base on that attorney review part of things that I wanted to look at, where, like, you as an attorney look into those liens, its zoning certificate, past insurance claims that we might have to be taking in consideration, especially for those letters that you send when we
Mhm.
are under contract. Can you tell us a little bit, like your approach on buyer inspection request, like when you are representing a seller and you receive a letter, how do you approach that, or how do you communicate with your client, seller client, about these repairs?
Sure. So as soon as I get the letter from the buyer's attorney, I forward it to the client and the agents and basically everybody on our end of the transaction. Um, I usually also prepare suggested responses. Most of the letter is way over the seller's head as far as the legal language. And I see all of that all the time. So I'm used to some of the requests that buyer's attorneys make. And sometimes they seem more complicated than they are. So I'll provide suggested responses for all of that. But I do have the seller pay attention to the seller or the inspection requests because that's where we need their input. Generally speaking, under the 7.0, they've really streamlined it so that there's only certain requests that should be made. Um, Obviously, things that are not functioning, things that are safety hazards, and those are the main ones. So if we see that, what I would recommend to a seller is if something is obviously not functioning or is a safety concern, probably consider that. We don't need to consider things that are functional but at the end of useful life. So, despite the AC being super, super old or the furnace or whatever else, as long as it's working, we don't really have to entertain it. We also don't even really have to entertain any of the other requests too. It's just in the interest of moving forward with the transaction, sometimes it's helpful to, offer credit or do the repairs. I would suggest to a seller to always, if they prefer it, to give a credit versus do the repair because repairs can be subjective. Usually buyers are asking for, a licensed contractor to do the work.
Yeah.
The seller picks somebody, then they do the walkthrough. The buyer doesn't like how the repair was done. A lot of times sellers try to, I don't want to say cheap
Give up
out
a little
on
bit of
doing the
money.
repairs, but getting some handyman to do it versus a contractor. Maybe they cut corners. Who knows? So sometimes it's just better give the money if you're okay with it, and we can discuss what is reasonable. I think I've had a lot of experience with that. So do you, Noah. And most agents are also very helpful in this regard because they're at the property and have seen it and they've had
Yeah.
experience with past repairs. And so we can kind of gauge a good credit to give. We don't need to get estimates unless the repairs are, very, I think like mold remediation or something like that, you would get, probably an invoice or an estimate. A lot of water issues that require like waterproofing or something, maybe get estimates for those. But for other stuff, we just give a blanket credit for all of those things, and that typically resolves the issue.
I
It
see.
depends on how motivated the seller is. If it's priced right or it's as is. And
I was just
so,
gonna, yes,
yeah.
I was gonna ask you how you feel about when we're actually in a as is transaction and
Hmm.
then we receive a letter with request.
Well,
Like,
I still think that the as is paragraph, if you can get the clients to sign it, it just sets the expectation that the seller doesn't really want to entertain anything. So if they're going to get like, $1,000 or less in credit requests, I mean, that kind of stuff, you would hope that that as is paragraph is going to dissuade a buyer from even requesting it. But if there's significant things on, the inspection that the buyer was not aware of, I always prepare sellers to be aware and mindful that you're going to expect to see requests despite the contract saying as is. Doesn't mean we have to entertain it, but we're going to get a letter that probably has the stuff on there. But we can always counter and say, when I represent the seller, I can just say, hey, it's as is. It is what it is. Either move forward or not. Depends on how motivated the seller is. Um, if they're not digging in their heels and not going to provide anything, then really that's our final response to the buyer. And the buyer makes a decision whether they want to move forward or not.
understood, understood.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you also, since we have you here, about condos. And these condo, I know you mentioned regulations, I know you mentioned bylaws and condo docs in general. What it is really like the list, if we can get a little specific about what is needed from the association, because sometimes I think it would help if sellers of condos are a little bit more aware of what's going to be needed, so they can prepare these documents a little bit upfront. I wouldn't even they provide them to me,
Mhm.
so we can be a little bit proactive and be prepared for this. We will also know upfront if we can entertain or not FHA buyers, for example, if we know that the budget is not there or there's not enough reserves. Or so,
Mhm.
what is your approach on that, and what it is actually that we will need, a little bit of a list?
Sure. So under the contract, the seller has to provide certain condo documents upon the buyer's request. And there's actually an act out there, the Illinois Condominium Property Act. There's a section in there called 22.1 for resales. It gives you the list of the things that you need. So basically, and a lot of the things the seller already has or should have. A lot of times with self-managed associations, you can get all of these documents for free, and we will request them during attorney review, but sometimes the listing agents ask for it in advance. If it's a larger association with a management company, there's a
Yeah,
cost usually to obtaining those fees, anywhere from I've seen 200 to I've seen up to 1,000, honestly, with some of these third party like HomeWise condo certs companies that they use.
we
You'll
had one
see,
like that.
yeah, it's
We
crazy.
actually had one like that. It was 1,000.
Yeah, it's insane what they charge just to generate, an automatic, I think, document. But regardless, so we prepare the clients for those fees and costs. We need a declaration, condo declaration, and bylaws. Usually, a plat of survey is attached to that. If it's not, we can request it from the title company. We need minutes of meetings, usually for the last 2 years. That doesn't fall under the act, but it's a very standard request that we expect in the industry that the buyer's attorneys are going to ask for.
Yeah,
Um, we get a 22.1 disclosure form. So either we get it automatically generated, or we can even provide a template to smaller associations to fill out themselves. It's going to have like basically what's the total reserves? Are there any anticipated expenditures in the next 2 years? That kind of thing.
yeah,
Budget. Usually the current budget is all that you need to provide. Sometimes you can give past year's budgets or even a proposed budget for like if it's the beginning of the year.
yeah,
And then the paid assessment letter. That we usually get at the end, which shows that there's obviously no past dues of the association or there's no any outstanding fees that this unit owner might have, and we'll need that for closing. The title company requires that as well. So those are the main
okay.
documents off the top of my head. I don't think anything else is missing, but yeah.
Mhm. I would agree. So Javier, what do you need? Well, you need those documents as well, for the most part for financing, correct?
Yeah, for financing, in most cases, we're always going to ask that. The only time that we don't is when we have a conventional buyer with 10% down. And that's what we call like a limited review with Fannie Mae. So in that particular case, we just usually ask for a condo questionnaire. There's no need to get the decks, budgets, and bylaws and stuff like that. I would say like for just some kind of like preemptively, like I think a lot of this stuff would be good. And it's a lot of like things that you could do preemptively ahead of schedule before putting your property. The reason I say this for condos more than anything is because I always say the marketability of a condo is going to be different when you're FHA. Like let's say you have a condo that's an FHA spot approval, right? You have
Yeah,
all of your numbers, you do the spot approval check, make sure that it's spot approval. You just opened it up to a whole different market of FHA buyers who probably qualify for an entry level condo and things like that. So for me, that's where I think it's like a part of like just doing a little bit of due diligence. But not only that, I'm going to preach this all year long. I think that one of the most discriminatory practices that's happened in real estate right now is the discrimination of FHA buyers, right? So I feel like the industry practice has always kind of put a stigma that FHA buyers are less qualified buyers, and I don't think that's the case. Specifically for me, I always advocate for my FHA buyers because in most cases, I'm either turning a conventional buyer to an FHA buyer in two situations. Either A, they make too much money to qualify for a first-time homebuyer conventional program, such as Home Ready or Home Possible, that actually has income restrictions for multi-units. And the other one is when they just have a gross amount of student loan debt, right? Student loan debt is something that we still have to have some form of a payment factor So when I get some of these like pre-med, pre-law, like people who are like putting up like six figure student loans on their credit, that's where sometimes it affects them. And in order for them to be able to get more buying power, we need more flexible guidelines, which FHA sometimes gives you. But for me, I think that if you're listing a property, number one, get educated so that you know, even if it's a single family home, like what is going to constitute me not being FHA approved to sell my home? Because potentially that could be the difference in regards to maybe getting a buyer who's maybe going to give you more money for your home because
Yep.
they've had limitations with winning other offers on other properties because they would only take a conventional deal, right? So I think just being a little bit more aware of what actually is going to get your property sold with what different type of loan is going to differentiate exactly the price point that you could put the property on the market, right? Because if you have a comp that maybe sold for 10K less or 15K less down the road, but they only need conventional offers because of the condition of the home, then you can advocate and put a case for your property as to why maybe you're pricing it that way because it's in great condition and you're not afraid to take any other offer as long as it's been a properly vetted approval, you know? So for me, more than anything, I really like the topics that we discussed because I think it could definitely prepare you to put yourself in a situation where you can get top dollar for your property when you finally list it and make it
Yeah.
more marketable so that this way maybe you're not closing that marketing ability to only conventional buyers or maybe someone who can only do 10% or more down. Because sometimes we didn't discuss it, but we run across like non-warrantable condos, right? And in those
Yeah.
particular cases, we have to get special type of financing. In most cases, they usually do need 20% down in order to get a non-warrantable condo financing. So just kind of doing your homework up front and doing your due diligence can make an impact in regards to the pricing of the home as well, too, in my opinion.
In time in the market, and
Mhm.
yeah, and successful
Absolutely.
sale. For sure, for sure. Okay. Is there anything, Avni, that you would like to add, that we might have not discussed, maybe regarding expenses or any other service or something that you look into when you have a contract for and representing a seller?
So, I mean, I just, you know, probably would want to make it clear to sellers that they don't have to do anything. We order the title commitment. We assist in clearing the liens. We will email them if we need an assistance in getting like a payoff of a mortgage or something like that. But we
Yeah.
calculate tax credits. We order the water and zoning certs. We'll order the condo docs on their behalf. So it's not something that they have to actively do. If they're retaining us, then we're doing everything. And if we need something from them, like an authorization to get something, we'll email them. But it's minimal. We're not trying to have the seller do all this work running around or doing any of that. The only things that we eventually end up needing from them is for them to sign a couple documents for closing. They usually don't even attend the closing. Sellers, typically 90% of the time, 95% of the time, especially with COVID going on, they don't even come. So usually I sign all the closing documents either in advance or at the closing with their
Yeah.
authorization. And that's it. It's pretty
I
straightforward and a lot
actually
easier.
I'm actually very happy that you clarified that and
Yeah.
mentioned that because, we just discussed a lot of fees and a lot of
Hmm.
title and tax preparation and all these words, and it
Right.
seems a long list. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I know, because I have worked with you before, so I know that
Yeah.
you guys take care of everything and guide just everything pretty much, hold the client in hand and deliver at closing,
Yeah.
and
And
then
it's like
worry about something.
all fees, like most of them are paid at closing. So there's nothing that they have to pay out of pocket. Maybe
Right.
even honestly, the condo fees, we tell them what the charge is and we just pay for it ourselves and then
Yeah.
reimburse ourselves at closing. Same thing with the survey. Like we'll order the survey, the invoice will come to us by closing. We'll add it to the closing statement. So there's no payouts or payments that need to be made by a seller prior to the closing. It's all taken out from the sale of the
The
property.
only uh, the only thing I just thought of that it might be a seller expense
Mhm.
during the transaction is if we are dealing with a property outside Chicago and it needs a pre-sale inspection. Those usually they do have a fee, and sometimes they do have to pay in order to have the inspector come out. But
That's
usually
true.
it depends. If from even $60, I've seen $60 ones
Yeah.
to 400. I had one
Yes.
Riverside was $400. It could be a little bit more. I haven't seen any higher than that. But probably that's the only thing that they will have to take in consideration prior to.
That is
Um,
true. That is true. And we'll notify the seller if there's anything that they have to do in advance. Transfer stamps for certain cities. Usually, our title company provides that service for a
yeah,
fee. And I usually even recommend to the seller, like, hey, don't get these stamps. They're actually little stickers. I
yeah,
mean, actual official stamps is what you call them, but you have to fix it to a deed. It's kind of old school still.
yeah.
But sometimes they have to be picked up at City Hall. And so we offer a service where we can get the title company to do it. Sometimes agents offer to do it because, again, we're trying to limit the amount of work that the seller has to do if they have to pay for that.
Well, if they hire me as their agent, they know they will be taken care of with that
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, I think that we have covered everything related with the seller expenses. I really appreciate you joining us tonight, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank
Hopefully,
you.
we have you next time soon.
And
Yes.
before we
Thank you
let
for
you go,
having me.
Avni, where could our viewers reach you if they want to reach you? What's a good point of
We're
contact?
going to put their information in the video.
Sure. Yeah. My first name Avni, Avni, last name Shah, Shah. My law firm name, we just changed it. It's Bell and Shaw. Um, I can provide all
Congratulations,
my
by the way.
information, but 773-635-0355 is our office line. My cell is 734-330-1048. That's all on our website, which is www.bellshah.com, and that's BELLSHAH.com. My email address is my first name, Avni, AVNI, at bellshaw.com. We recently just changed our email addresses too. So those are the best ways to reach me, either cell phone, email, or office line. We're available all the time. So with any questions, if you guys have them, feel free to reach out to me.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you, Avni, for being with us today.
Awesome.
Looking forward to a very successful 2021. And thank you so
Yes.
much for your service with our clients.
Thank you so much for having me. See you guys.
Here.
All
Talk
right.
soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Okay, DJ Javi. Whew,
Are we still
today,
live? What's this?
what?
I said, are we still live yet?
Yeah, we're gonna do a quick wrap up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
So today, today's episode was seller expenses. What is a seller? Thank you, Aneda. Thank you, thank you. So today it was seller expenses, as we said, and we have our attorney Avnisha joining, and she went over seller net chi, what the expenses are, and we are going to have a fourth episode. Bootcamp is 4 episodes, as we did for the buyer. The fourth episode is going to be a little surprise one, but it will be next week, Tuesday, at same time, 5:30. And yeah, today I feel like we had a little bit of an issue with the camera. I'm not really sure if it was the internet or not, like the clarity of the image. I hope the audio was good, and I hope that our viewers and listeners enjoy or learn something new today as well. Thank you, Barry. Thank you for joining again today. You're a great supporter. We will see you next week. Next week we have some surprises. And yeah, and for any real estate questions, reach out to our team. Javier, say something.
yeah, if you happen to have any real estate questions, if you're looking to maybe elevate your IQ in regards to real estate information, we're always here as as a resource to everyone out there. Rates are really low as always. I always got to plug in the fact that there's no better time to buy than it is now. And we look forward to bringing more educational content for everyone out there, consumers and our industry peers as well too, so that this
Oh,
way, yeah, are we still here? Are we still on?
we are totally here. It was that my internet disconnected from my phone. I had the hotspot. Do you
Oh,
see my case? Look at my new case. It matches the laptop or where we're at.
nice.
right?
So yeah, no, we look forward to bringing more educational information to everyone out there, into the masses. We're also looking for some more feedback from you as well too, in regards to what would you like for us to discuss. Is there any topics in specific? You guys are going to be surprised. Every single month, we're going to be providing some informative information, market updates in regards to what's trending, some myths, and best ways to put you in a position to succeed more than anything in the world.
Yes. Well, my dear, have a wonderful evening. I will talk to you later.
Talk soon.
Thank you for watching.
Bye bye.